All right, you guys, it is 7:19. No, it's 7:09. Let's get this timing right. It's 10 after 7. Today is the 17th of May. The 17th of May. And this video here, this is Sunday. So normally what I do on Sundays is I do a review of my Sabbath study, right? But I did my Sabbath study yesterday out of Exodus chapter 30. And I knew yesterday when I was doing the Sabbath study that I will be coming back. Like, I'm still not through this chapter. So next week we'll be coming back to it again. But let me tell you, this one here. So I just picked up where I left off today. I'm not doing a review of yesterday, but where I left off, y'all, this one, I think everybody's gonna need to see this one. So I am where we at now? Here we go. I started this at 8 this morning, y'all, and it's 7 and I'm just now finishing. All right, so this is Exodus chapter 30 again, and what we're looking at, this will be the B part. And again, there's like 2 more parts in this chapter, but today in particular, we're looking at the ransom money, which will be verses 11 through 16. So 11, 12, 13, 14, 15, 16, 6 verses. We're looking at verses 11 through 16, whereas yesterday we looked at verses 1 through 10, which was the altar of incense. So I knew coming in, I knew that this one was going to be a good study. Just the fact that it was talking about ransom money, I wanted to know. And so the first thing that I did was I looked up the definition of ransom. And I did that because of the fact that, when I think, first of all, a long time ago, there was a movie called Ransom. I think this movie came out before the year 2000, like in the 1990s or something. Don't quote me on that, though. But I'm thinking that it did. Or maybe like 2000, 2001. Hold on one second. Oh, okay. Sorry about that. Sorry, but I had closed my blinds. Usually, like, I'm able to tell if anybody's coming up to the door or whatever. And so, yeah, that was just the sun reflecting off of the car out there. So anyway, I looked up the word ransom. And because when I think of ransom, I think of like somebody's being held hostage, and the people that is holding the person hostage, they want a ransom. They want you to pay a price in order to release this person. That is my thought when it comes to ransom. So yeah, I needed to look it up, because here in Exodus chapter 30, verse 11 through 16, there is a ransom money. I'm like, So ransom, it comes from a Latin word that means redemption. It is the redeeming or release of a captive or seized property by payment of money or compliance with other demands, which was my thought, right? From movies I watch, ransom, It's also, another definition is the price paid or demanded. And the third definition is deliverance from sin or redemption. So, having that definition, the first thing I do now is I read verse 11 and 12. And I want to read that to you. I want to share this. And these are the first 2 verses. Remember, we're only doing 6 verses 11 through 16. So this is what verse 11 and 12 says. It says, "Then the Lord spoke to Moses, saying, when you take the census of the children of Israel for their number, then every man shall give a ransom for himself to the Lord when you number them, that there may be no plague among them when you number them." That is the first 12. And so I'm looking at this, right? And the purpose of the ransom was because a plague would be sent among the people after the census was taken if they were numbered. And I didn't understand this. Like, I wanted to understand, okay, why? Because I didn't understand. But one of the things that I do know of is, so there is a chapter in the Bible, is 2 Samuel chapter 24, where David did a census of the people, right? And Joab, his military commander, was trying to tell him, don't do it, but David was king. And first of all, Joab was like his nephew, I think, one of his sisters or brother's kids or something like that. He was a nephew. But anyway, Joab was trying to tell him, don't do it. But David, he overruled. Like I said, he was king. He overruled. And he did this census. And then after he did the census, immediately after he did the census, his heart convicted him. And so he knew that he had sinned against the Lord, and he felt so much regret over it. And so a prophet was sent to him, and the prophet said to him, okay, you got 3 choices. Ooh, let's go look at those choices real quick. I'm off my notes already, and I'm on a time crunch again. But I got to share this. I had to share this. Because it's so interesting to me. Anyway, this was 2 Samuel chapter 24. I don't know where I was turning, y'all. I was way back in Chronicles. I had to reel it back in. Okay, 2 Samuel chapter 24. This was his options. And the prophet was Gad. And so, it says, this is verse 11. Now, when David arose in the morning, the word of the Lord came to the prophet Gad, David's seer, saying, verse 12, go and tell David, thus says the Lord, I offer you 3 things. He says, choose one of them for yourself, that I may do it to you. So Gad came to David and told him, and he said to him, shall 7 years, here's the first one, shall 7 years of famine come to you in your land? Or, this is number 2, shall you flee 3 months before your enemies while they pursue you? Or, here's number 3, shall there be 3 days plague in your land? Now consider and see what answer I should take back to him. And this is what Gad is saying. Consider these 3 things. You got 7 years, 3 months, or 3 days. Which one? Consider it, and so that I could take it back and let the Lord know what you said. So David said, I'm in great distress. This is verse 14. Please let us fall into the hand of the Lord, for his mercies are great, but do not let me fall into the hand of man. So what did God do? He sent a plague, 3 days plague, right? So anyway, I'm not going to go any more into that, because that would take me in a whole direction and then what I wanted to do with this study. So the purpose of me sharing that was the fact that, and like I said, I've studied this chapter before. You also see, there was something that I wanted to share with y'all in this chapter. I got it in my notes. About, the significance. So I'm gonna pass over that. The significance of because of what I need to now share with you. I realized, like, in my study, I'm sitting here trying to figure this out about this census. And while I was trying to figure it out about the census was because they take censuses today. Like, I think it's every 10 years. I meant to look that up and I forget. But they take census today, and so I wanted to know, like, okay, because as I'm getting this, I wanted to know, I'm like, well, after they take a census, does a plague come through still? Because God is the same yesterday, today, and forever. Like, have we not been equating this two? Have we not put this two together? So I wanted to know, and I kind of think I still want to know. I kind of think I still want to know now that I'm going over this from the beginning. So anyway, I know why I mentioned that too. So, this particular chapter, or this portion that we read in 2 Samuel, you also see it in 1 Chronicles chapter 21, verse number 1. I'm turning there now. 1 Chronicles 21:1. Now here it says, now Satan stood up against Israel and moved David to number Israel. So it's saying that Satan did this, whereas in the 24th chapter of 2 Samuel verse 1, it says, again, the anger of the Lord was aroused against Israel. We're talking all 12 tribes, not the 10 tribes, because in the time of David and Saul, the 12 tribes were still together. They had not yet been separated. So against all 12 tribes, God was angry with them again. Like his getting angry with these Israelites is real serious, and we'll eventually talk about that part. But he was angry against them again, and so it says, and he moved David against them to say, go number Israel and Judah. Now, the numbering of Israel and Judah is significant because of what we read in Exodus chapter 30, verse 11 and 12, or verse 12, about the fact that there was a tax, a temple tax, a ransom money, a ransom price that needed to be paid at the time of the census, when the census was being taken. And so the note says here, it says, God allowed Satan to entice David to number the people and act that while acceptable under certain circumstances, which is Exodus 30:12, which is what we're studying about. It says here in this chapter 24 of 2 Samuel, as well as chapter 12 of First Chronicles, it says here, probably revealed that David was putting trust in his military power rather than in the Lord's protection and guidance. Another possibility is that David failed to instruct his commanders to collect the half shekel poll tax, bringing on the plague. In either case, God did not force David to make the wrong decision. So the note was specifically about this decision that God made, but it gave us information that was based on what I was studying in Exodus chapter 30 in regards to this temple tax. And so it left me at the very beginning of my preparing to do this study. I had questions. So here's my questions. I have 6 that I listed. So number 1, I asked the question, does taking a census, because I'm looking at this stuff from yesterday, but I'm considering today. So does taking a census still bring on a plague today if the poll tax is not taken with it? That's number 1. Number 2, are poll taxes collected today when censuses are taken? Number 3, what significant change has been noted after taking a census today? So I want to go back, because here's one of the things that I've learned about our country and the internet. They are tracking everything. For example, when you look at like what happened with COVID, when you look at like whatever it is, the analysis, these analysis reports, they do analysis reports on some of everything. So I wanted to know, is there a report out there that shows, like there's a report of course out there that shows the census, but is there a report that will tell me that, or reveal to me that there is a significant change that happens after a census is taken? And again, I know the censuses are taken usually every 10 years. My 4th question, how often are censuses taken? Number 1 in the Bible, number 2 today. So I done said today several times, 10 years, every 10 years. I just have to verify that. I believe that. I've seen that, like when you do your ancestry reports and they're showing you like different census counts, like I seen it with ancestry report that was done for my grandfather, when he was little, my grandmother, it was every 10 years. So that's what makes me think every 10 years, but I have not confirmed that. But I wanted to know, how often are they taken in the Bible, which means now I'm going to have to pay attention from this point. Now I need to pay attention to every time that I'm reading that a census is being taken. But I also know the census language, like literally, they'll call it a poll tax. They'll call it a like a temple tax. It's the same thing. It is the because this is only taken up once a year. So this is the same thing. Oh, I just got my answer. But wait a minute. That is not right. Is that my answer? Okay, so I know that the ransom money was taken up every year, once a year. But does that necessarily mean that a census was taken once a year? No, that doesn't. I know that the ransom money was taken up on the date of Yom Kippur, which is the Day of Atonement, because that's what the ransom money was for. It was for atonement. I know these things. I just gotta prove it, and I haven't proved it yet because I'm so busy getting other information, and I'm just now re-looking at when I first started this study. So yeah. So I want to like go into detail about what the poll tax is, what the purpose of the poll tax is. Those were things that at the beginning, I wanted to learn, and I believe that I just shared what the poll tax is. I believe that I got my answer for that. What the purpose of the poll tax is, of course, the atonement. So I think I got the answer for that. I'm not quite sure that I have the answer for how often the census was taken, but I do understand how often the ransom money was taken. And then the things as it applies to today, that part I have to look up. So anyway, I felt led to examine also the various censuses that was in the Bible that I could like quickly find that was in the Bible. And so I looked up census, and y'all, let me tell y'all, because I wanted to understand. Hold on. Oh, wait a minute. I didn't know. Okay, here you go. So anyway, I caught myself looking up census using my Strong's Concordance because I wanted to know, like, I wanted to dig into it, and I wanted to see all the censuses. So when I looked up the word census, it gave me 3 references to look up. The first was number, the second was sum, the third was taxation. I looked up number first, and I was immediately just overwhelmed. It was 178 references, scriptures that had to do with numbering. Now, all of them did not have to do with the census, but 178. Y'all think I was about to look up? I don't need to say it like that, but like that was a lot. It was a lot, and I was just instantly overwhelmed. For some, there was 21 references, of which I did look up several. Like when I looked at what I have down here, I did cover several of these with the taxing and the taxation. I don't think it was 4. No, it was 7 total for tax. How come I only got 4 down here? I don't know why I only have 4, because it was 7 total. But anyway, looking at number, the one that had the 178, the first thing that stood out to me was the first 2 references in Genesis. Well, I should say all the references in Genesis. And so I got it written here. It says Genesis 13:16 and Genesis 15:5. Those were the first 2, right? But in both of those, God was addressing with Abraham that he was going to increase him. He was going to multiply him, increase him, that his seed would be innumerable, uncountable. Like he was told, if you can count the sands of the sea, then, right? And so this count thing was a big deal. That's literally the first time where you're being introduced to the fact of somebody being counted. And so again, Genesis 13:16, you can look that up later, and then Genesis 15 verse 5, we're being shown that this count was going to be one that is so huge, like you can't number it. Then there was Genesis chapter 34 verse 30, which basically let us know that with God, the total number doesn't matter. You have to go and look that verse up. The total number doesn't matter. And then there's Genesis chapter 41 verse 49, where the numbering was stopped because it was too much. Like, I guess they tried to number, but it was too much, so it was stopped. After that, after those 4 in Genesis, then we have the commands regarding numbering that is given in Exodus. So, like I said, it was so much here. I kind of I was overwhelmed. And before I get lost in going over these references, I decided, let me get back to Exodus chapter 30, because listen, I did not feel like going down no rabbit holes today. I just didn't. So Exodus chapter 30 verse 11 through 16, that's what we're looking at. And I want to read with you the reference note that has to do with verse 12 through 16, because in that reference note in my Bible, it gives the motive for taking a census. And so this is what it says. It says, the motive for taking a census was typically military. The need to pay a ransom, also called an offering, take note of that, a half shekel each, in order to avert a plague, reminded everyone, this part is important, it reminded everyone that the nation as a whole and its citizens belonged to the Lord. Their preservation depended ultimately on God, not on their military strength, not on their wealth, and not even on their poverty. And so that was the purpose of the shekel payment, the ransom payment, which was a half a shekel. It was to remind them that, I'm going to say it again here, that everyone as a whole belongs to God. And your strength, your ability to fight, your military strength, your wealth, even your poverty does not matter. Why? Because whether you was rich or whether you was poor, you still had to pay the same amount, which was a half a shekel. The rich could not pay more because they had more money. Nope, you still got to pay a half a shekel. The poor could not pay less because, nope, you still had to pay a half a shekel, which lets us know, and I'm jumping ahead of myself, but this lets us know that, again, it was emphasizing or equalizing everything and emphasizing the fact that God is not a respecter of persons. I done just jumped ahead of myself, so now let me pull it back to my notes. I'm still trying to figure this thing out in my notes, and so I decided to look up, what is the value of a shekel. So today, the shekel is called INS, which means I'm just looking at notes. Somebody sent a message. So anyway, the shekel is called INS, or ILS, excuse me, ILS, and it's the Israeli new shekel, and basically it is worth 34 cents. 1 shekel today is worth 34 cents. If you take one of our American dollars and you turn it in over there in Israel to get shekels, $1 is equal to $2.92 of the Israeli new shekel. Now, basically, what a shekel simply means is weight. It was a silver coin, and it weighed about 0.4 ounces, not even a full ounce, or 11 grams. Now, a talent, in the Bible, when you read about talents, A talent is your heaviest and largest unit of measure for weight and value. And so 1 talent is equal to 3,000 shekels. Now, I'm sitting here and I'm writing all this down. I'm learning about the biblical half shekel and that it was the annual temple tax. So in the New Testament, where you read about how they had to pay this annual temple tax, a half of a shekel is an annual temple tax. It says this roughly is about 8 grams of silver, valued at about $6 today. It also equals to 160 grains of barley. Again, I'm looking at all this stuff. I am getting all these measurements, learning the calculations and everything, and then something hits me. Exodus chapter 30, verse 12 says, when you take the census of the children of Israel for their number, then every man shall give a ransom for himself to the Lord when you number them. So in other words, when they come back and they count you, you pay that shekel, that there may be no plague among you when you number them, or among them when you number them. So I'm now looking at these references regarding, because in the scripture I have like marginal notes. So in the scriptures, it gave a reference about taking the census of the children, and it also gave a reference about the ransom that they would give to the Lord, right? So I look at the reference for taking the census of the children of Israel. I looked at those first. It is 1, 2, 3, about 4 of them, right? So the first reference I look at is Exodus chapter 38, verse 25. And it talks about the silver, right? That the atonement money was silver. Let me go over there real quick. Exodus 38, and this is going to be, I'm going to read to you verse 24, 25, and 26. And then we're going to talk about all of that. So 24 says, all the gold that was used in all the work of the holy place, that is, the gold of the offering, was 29 talents and 730 shekels, according to the shekel of the sanctuary. And the silver from those who were numbered of the congregation, and that's a census. The silver from those who were numbered, that's a census of the congregation, was 100 talents and 1,775 shekels. Remember, a talent is equal to 3,000 shekels, right? But this one, in this case, is 100 talents and 1,775 shekels, according to the shekel of the sanctuary. And then verse 26 tells us that a beka for each man, that is a half a shekel, according to the shekel of the sanctuary, for everyone included in the numbering from 20 years old and above, for 603,550 men. Now I went ahead and read these 3 verses, so let me share with you my notes. This reference here in chapter 38, verse 25, spoke of the silver. That was the ransom. The ransom was not gold. It was silver. Even though it talked about gold and it talked about the measurement or the weight of this gold, the ransom is only silver. That part. Number 2, this silver was taken from those who were numbered of the congregation. So again, like I said earlier, that is a census. It says 100 talents and 1,775 shekels. And so I'm looking at this and I'm remembering these measurements, right? So if 3,000 shekels is 1 talent, then 300,000 shekels would be 100 talents. To that 300,000, you add 1,775 shekels. So now you have 301,775 shekels. But remember, the temple tax, or the ransom money, or the poll tax, however, whatever word you want to use to call it, It was a half of a shekel. So since we're looking at a shekel, now we're going to divide it, or not divide it, we're going to multiply this number by 2. We're going to multiply the number by 2, the 301,775 by 2, because what happened is that would give us the total amount of men aged 20 and over that was counted. So I did that, and I came up with 603,550 men, and that would have been how many was counted aged 20 and older. See, by the time I was doing this, I had not yet read verse 26, which literally tells us, it says, for everyone included in the number from 20 years old and above, for 603,550 men. And I was like, oh, my math was right. My math was mathing. So, again, this gold, right? Because in verse 24, it mentioned that the gold was given. So the gold that was given was a free will offering. The gold was it represented generosity. It was a free will offering that was given for the temple construction, and it was given only if the person who gave it was moved from their heart to do so. It was not something that, like they doing in some of these churches now, talking about close the door and taking up the quote unquote tithes or offerings. No, that's not a free will offering. You're not supposed to do that. That is not something that is acceptable by God. It's not. You're not. I seen this one video the other day, yesterday, I think it was, where the guy was like, you're gonna hand in your tax return or something like that. Your tax. You don't have to listen. You don't have to hand in your tax returns to any pastor. You do not. If you're coerced, if you're being coerced, if they're trying to make you give, you don't have to give nothing if your heart is not in it. God wants a free will offering. The gold was a free will offering. The silver, on the other hand, was an atonement money, but it was only half a shekel. And it represented equality. That was the whole significance of it. It was the same amount for everybody. It didn't matter how much money you had or how little money you had. It was the same amount, and it was for every male age 20 and over. It was a set amount. So the rich couldn't give more. I said this already, but I'm going to say it again. The poor couldn't give less. Basically, what that amount, that ransom amount, was letting us know is that everybody's life had the exact same value. So all this stuff they're doing down here now on this earth, trying to make people feel like a different color or different status or nationality, like their life don't matter, or nope, that's not true. Listen, I don't care if you are a millionaire before God. Oh, I just thought, okay, so one of my clients just published their book. We just finished publishing their book last month, the end of last month, and their book was called Judged, and it was about the rich man and Lazarus, right? But at the end of the day, before God, that rich man and Lazarus, both of them, their life was of equal value before God. It didn't matter that one had all this money and stuff, and the other one didn't have anything. To God, that's why I call it the equalizer. This ransom money was an equalizer. It tears down all these walls. There's no big I's and there's no little U's, and that was the purpose of the ransom money. That was the purpose of the temple tax. So let's keep going. This part too. A portion of the silver that was used for the temple tax, a portion of it was used to cast the heavy foundations or the sockets that held up the tabernacle walls. So the entire holy structure of the tabernacle, the sanctuary that was being built, for God to reside among his people, that everything that they were building, these blueprints, how about this? The entire holy structure literally rested on the foundation of the people's ransom money, because a portion of that silver was taken and it was melted down and cast. That means cast. So it was melted down and put into these foundations. It was used to cast the heavy foundations that the structures was set upon. So I ended up writing in my notes what is significant about this particular count. Because again, I'm still wrestling with this, right? So I'm like, what is so significant about it that this same count is found in Exodus chapter 38? Like, this count was taken, and that was something else that I paid attention to. This count was taken after the people had gotten in trouble for idol worship in Exodus chapter 32. See, and that will be Exodus chapter 32, verse 35. Let's go look at that real quick. Exodus chapter 32, verse 35. How do I know this count was taken after the census count was taken after the people got in trouble? Because in verse 35 it says, so the Lord plagued the people because of what they did with the calf which Aaron made. So a plague came upon these people, but they were told in the blueprint, because what we're looking at is a blueprint in Exodus chapter 30. They were told that if you don't give this amount, then a plague will come, right? So you give this amount so that you will avoid having this plague come. But then something happened. We'll talk about that in a minute. Something happened in Exodus chapter 32 to cause a plague to come on them anyway. And then in Exodus chapter 38, what they were told, the blueprint that they were told, it is now going into effect, where they're now talking again about this tax money. So anyway, this is what I wrote. By Exodus 38:25, there was now 603,550 recorded men over 20. See, they had taken this count by this time. So I started looking at the counts because I wanted to know, okay, like, what is happening here? Like, did the number go up and down? Like, what? So the last count that I remember, which would have been the first count that was taken, was the Israelites coming out of Egypt. And you see that count in Exodus chapter 12, verse 37, where it's like about 600,000 men on foot besides the children. But at this point in Exodus 38:25, it's 603,550, right? So that's a higher number. Stay with me now. Stay with me on this. The references that was given to me was for this Exodus 12:37, I think. The references that was given to me was Exodus 38:26, and that's where we would talk that the count would be for the ages of 20 and above, as well as that the count would, my calculating of the count was right, that part. So now I'm looking at these other references. So we got two in Genesis. It's Genesis chapter 12 and Genesis chapter 46. Genesis chapter 12, verse 2. God says to Abraham, he says, I will make you a great nation. God is saying, I will make. So this is covenant language. So now I'm looking at the blueprints and I'm looking at covenant. This is covenant language. Then in Genesis chapter 46, verse 3, it is now Jacob, who is also known as Israel, that God is talking to. And he says to Jacob not to be afraid to go to Egypt, because he says to him that number one, he says, I'll be with you wherever you go. But then he says to him that I will make you a great nation. And so the exact blessing that he gave to Abraham was given to Jacob, who is also called Egypt. Then we get to Numbers, because again, these are the references that was given to me in in Exodus chapter 12. So in Numbers chapter 1, verse 46, it continues with the count being 603,550. So what has happened was this. From the moment that this information is given in Exodus, then you have the book of Leviticus, right? But the book of Leviticus is giving you all the information, all the blueprints that deal specifically with the priesthood, who is specifically now the tribe of Levi, as opposed to the entire nation. So they're dealt with first. And then the book of Numbers picks up where we left off in Exodus. So that's why you see in verse 46 of Numbers chapter 1, this exact same count, 603,550, who was getting ready to leave the wilderness, who was getting ready to leave from the mountain of the Lord and go to the promised land. We're talking about all the tribes. Then you have the fourth reference. Let's see, 1, 2, 3, 4. The fifth reference would have been Numbers chapter 11, verse 21. And by this particular verse, the number had dropped from 603,550. It had dropped to 600,000. That means 3,550 people died. Why? I wanted to know, okay, what happened? Because now I'm paying attention. Now that I'm understanding, I need to clean my glasses. See, I have experience having like super clean glasses. And once I experience that, it's these things here that I got from my son. So I'm going to have to do this again. But anyway, once I understood the count, once I understood the temple tax, or the ransom money, once I was getting that, as it was clicking with me and I was beginning to get it. And then I noticed, okay, the number was 603,550, but wait a minute, now it's 600,000. I'm like, okay, something happened because these people died. What happened? Numbers chapter 11. Oh, perfect. Numbers chapter 11. This will be verse 1 through 3. Yeah. Numbers 11, verse 1 through 3. This is what happened. It says, now when the people complained, catch. If you don't think your words matter, think again. It says, now when the people complained, it displeased the Lord, for the Lord heard it, and his anger was aroused. So the fire of the Lord burned among them and consumed some in the outskirts of the camp. Then the people cried out to Moses, and when Moses prayed to the Lord, the fire was quenched. So he called the name of the place Taberah, because the fire of the Lord had burned among them. So that was the first thing. So complaining, y'all, listen. If you know anybody that is a complainer, we need to get a hold of these complainers, and we need to let them know that is not something that the Lord likes. You will die from that. Listen. And then again, Hebrews chapter 13, I think it's either verse 5 or it's verse 8. It lets us know that God is the same yesterday, today, and forever, which means that if the complaining got on his nerves yesterday, don't think it don't get on his nerves now. Don't think because you haven't just like automatically dropped, or you haven't immediately experienced something, that you won't experience something. Listen, we're opening doors that we don't even realize that we're opening with our behaviors, with our actions, because this is not being taught. So heads up. Complaining, stop it. Heads up. And like we'll go more into that another time, because we can even complain in our hearts. It's not just what we say out of our mouths, but is my heart complaining? Because God pays attention to the heart. So Numbers 11, 1 through 3, the people complained. A lot of them died. But that wasn't the end of it. Because if you stay in Numbers chapter 11 and you go over to verse 33, it says here, verse 33, because they were complaining about meat to eat or whatever, and God sent quails, right? Verse 33 says, but while the meat was still between their teeth, before it was chewed, the wrath of the Lord was aroused against the people, and the Lord struck the people with a very great plague. So he called the name of that place Kibroth Hattaavah, because they were buried. Because there they buried the people who yielded to craving. That part. It says the blessing turned to craving, and the craving to disease and death, leading to the name of the location, Kibroth Hattaavah, which means graves of craving. This says the very great plague sent upon the people might have been food poisoning due to the time the quail meat remained in the sun without proper processing and drying. Even if there are natural explanations, the ultimate cause was the wrath of God. Listen, once we get to paying attention to this stuff. So anyway, yeah, once we get to paying attention to all of this, now it start making sense. So there's a key. So here's the first key, is to understand that the shekel is a weight. The shekel weighs like 0.4 ounces or 11 grams. 1 shekel equals 20 giras. So therefore a half shekel is 10 giras. A half shekel is also called a bika, and 3,000 shekels is a talent. That is a key. There are certain keys in the Bible that will unlock other scriptures to you. So I made sure to take note of that. Now, reference number 2 in reference to the census was Numbers chapter 1, verse 2 and 5. Now, where Exodus chapter 30, verse 12 is a blueprint for how the census was to be taken, when and why, what's who and where. Numbers chapter 1 verse 2 and 5. Let me read that. It says, so Numbers chapter 1 verse 2 and 5 is the actual census being taken. So it is the making. And that's something else that I learned. There's 3 areas. You have the blueprint, you have the making, and then you have the positioning. And so Numbers chapter 1 verse 2 and 5 is what I call the making. Is when it's actually happening, that the census is actually taking place. So the blueprint, because what we have to do is we got to make sure we understand the blueprint. So Exodus 30, again, our cover is verse 11 through 16, right? But verse 11 is just God saying this to Moses. And then verse 12 through 16 is the rest of it. So in verse 13, it tells us what about this ransom money, that it was to be taken as an offering to the Lord. It was a half shekel. Verse 12 tells us when it was to be taken. When a census was taken, this ransom was to be taken. Who was to pay it? Verse 14 of Exodus chapter 30 tells us that everybody, the ages of 20 and up, you're 20 and up, everybody had to take it. So therefore, people thinking that they grown at 18, you could be 18 back then and would not have to would not have to pay this shekel, this half shekel, this temple tax. But once you hit 20, you have to pay that shekel tax. Verse 12 talked about why also. Why was so that there may be no plague among them when they were numbered. Verse 12 also told how and when. So the tax had to be paid when they were numbered, and again, why or how every man had to give this ransom for himself to the Lord. And that part caught me too. He was giving it for himself. He was paying the ransom for himself. Catch that, hold on to that, because it's something significant there, and we're going to come back to it in a second. Verse 14 and 15 talked about who. So like we said earlier, it didn't matter whether you were rich or poor, you still had to pay this tax, and the amount was the same. It was a set price. Verse 15 also let us know that the rich couldn't give more, the poor couldn't give less. Verse 15 told us why, to make atonement for themselves. That part, looking at the fact that this was to make atonement for themselves, is when things began to click for me. And so now I'm going to go really slow now, because I want to make sure that you're understanding what I'm about to share with you, because this is serious. You see, today we cannot make atonement for ourselves. We have to go through King Jesus who made the atonement for us. King Jesus made the atonement for us when he died for us. We cannot make this atonement for ourselves. But when you look at Exodus chapter 30 verse 15, they were making the atonement for themselves. That was the blueprint. That's how it was supposed to work out. And so both is correct. Like, what happened? Because Today, they can't make atonement for themselves. But the blueprint said that they could. And today, we have to go through King Jesus. So what happened? How can both be true? Why was it that they were able to make atonements for themselves and we can't today? So I'm going to clearly and understandably explain this thing to y'all. You guys, it is huge and it is amazing. The answer is found in understanding timing as well as understanding what we are looking at in these verses. So first thing first, we're going to address what we're looking at, and I'm going to show you the blueprint. Exodus 30, chapter 30, verse 1 starts off by saying, you shall make. Now, how about this? The blueprints that was given to Moses initially in chapter 25 of Exodus, verse 8 and 9, Moses was told that he was going to prepare a sanctuary. What was they making? They were making a sanctuary because God wanted to dwell with his people. So these blueprints needed to be understood, and they needed to be followed completely, correctly. Like verse 9 of Exodus 25. This is what God said to Moses. Chapter 25, verse 9. It says, according to all that I show you, that is the pattern of the tabernacle and the pattern of all its furnishings, just so you shall make it. So he had to explicitly follow this blueprint. And so what we need to understand about the blueprint is this. The blueprints, period, just straight across the board, blueprints reveal instabilities so that a weakness in the structure, before you even begin to make it, the weakness can be caught and fixed early on. They not only show what will stand, but they also will show what cannot support a structure. Now, I'm talking about blueprints in general. So before anything is fully built, the blueprint phase reveals the weight limits, the weak points, missing supports, any improper alignments, any dangerous mixtures or structural failings that would happen, and it exposes the stuff before it happens. The blueprint itself is not flawed. It is not flawed. Again, it is supposed to expose weaknesses and fractures that are flawed. And this is what the law did, which is why the law is perfect. It is, and it was perfect. So keep in mind that what we are looking at is a blueprint. Now, I need to pause here because this is where it's about to get amazing, good, and things that we thought we knew, like everything will start clicking now. Like it would literally start everything. You know, when you talk about like your church and how like everything will begin to click now. But I need to pause here for a second, so I'll be right back. Okay, so yesterday, when I was looking at Exodus chapter 30, and I was looking at the blueprints for the altar of incense, I stumbled across something. What I stumbled across was that the blueprints must be understood first. It was in looking at the reference, something about the references that I was looking at yesterday in reference to this altar, and I found myself, again, I'm in Exodus chapter 30, right? But then I found myself looking at Exodus chapter 40, which talked about the positioning of this altar. And so when I went to go look at Exodus chapter 35, it was the making of the altar. And I'm like, wait a minute. And that's when it clicked with me. So let me ask you this question. Have you ever purchased something from, we're gonna say Walmart, because everybody knows Walmart. Have you ever purchased something like a desk or something. I recently, well, it wasn't recent, but it was like a couple of years ago. I purchased this cabinet, like really nice cabinet. It's over there, and I got so much stuff in front of it I can't show you. But have you ever purchased something from Walmart that you had to assemble? Oh, how about this one? We purchased, this was this year, and they're out in the yard, but we purchased some raised garden beds, and they sent us this long thin box, and inside, and it was heavy, and inside the box was everything that you needed, like literally everything that you needed, and there was a sheet of paper, and the sheet of paper was the instructions. So have you ever purchased something and then you just started assembling it without paying attention to the instruction manual that is given, whether it is one sheet of paper, whether it's a booklet, like whatever it is? Have you ever purchased something, did not pay attention to the instruction manual, assembled it, only to find out that you had to unassemble it now and follow the directions so that you could put this thing together right? Well, the blueprints is the instructions, the instruction manual. And if we're supposed to understand the instruction manual first, that's Exodus chapter 30. After that, then you get to chapter 37 where you're now putting everything together. Why? Because you understand the instruction manual, you understand the blueprints, you understand how to put it together. And when you get through putting it together, then you come across Exodus chapter 40, which is now you're going to take what you built that has been assembled correctly, and you're going to put it in the position that it's supposed to be in. We need to be able to read and understand the blueprint. We need to be able today to recognize the blueprint, their part. But we need to be able to read and understand the blueprint and follow the instructions if what we are building is going to be usable. Here's some examples. As a child, learning how to cook. My mama... Like, I think the first thing that she had me cooking, like baking a cake or something, you have a box, whatever it is, whatever it is, you have a box, right? And when you get the box or whatever you're going to cook, it has the instructions on it. She would just stick me in the kitchen, put it in front of me and say, okay, fix it. And so I had to follow the instructions. My mom taught me how to cook that way. It became a favorite of mine, baking, like baking the cakes and everything, because you follow the directions, you press whatever you have to put, stick it in the oven, and then you can walk away from it until it's time. That's how I learned how to cook, following the instructions. But then I got to thinking about something, because you can't go wrong following the directions, right? So I got to thinking about this. Many times at the churches, when they have these like gatherings where you're bringing in food or whatever to eat, they real particular about who brings in what food, and they're particular because they know everybody can't cook, and so they're like, if a person can't cook, they'll put them on a cleaning committee, or they'll put them on some other committee, but they'll be like, don't bring, you can serve, but don't cook anything, don't bring it in. And me understanding these blueprints and understanding what I'm looking at now, I'm sitting here thinking about this now as I was going over it, and I'm like, wait a minute, you can't cook? How come you can't cook? Because the recipe, if you follow the instructions of the recipe, you cannot mess up. So I believe, I've come to understand, and I believe that a person who cannot cook is a person who does not know how to follow instructions in the story. Because reading blueprints, following the directions, following the instructions, that's the first thing we have to do. And again, you cannot go wrong. And that's Exodus chapter 30. Well, it's Exodus chapter 25 to 30. And anyway, because you don't see the process of making anything. And I said Exodus chapter 30 because you don't see the process of making anything, of making it, the actual making. You don't see that process until Exodus 37. In Exodus 30, you're given the instructions of what to do. And How about this? Let me because I think I said that a little bit too fast. In Exodus chapter 30, that is where you're given the instructions. It is in Exodus chapter 37 that they begin making everything, but here's the deal. And here's why I went back. In that distance from chapter 30 to chapter 27 lies the answer to why it was that both was true about how in Exodus chapter 30 verse 15 they were able to make atonement for themselves, but now today they can't. And now today we have to go through King Jesus. But the answer to why that is found in what happened between Exodus chapter 30 and Exodus chapter 27. That part, this is what I'm so excited to share with you. So we're going to look at what happened right now, because that is where my weekday studies in Leviticus chapter 26, the blessing, that's where this study actually comes into my Sabbath study. And in particular, it is the blessing that God gave in Leviticus chapter 26, verse 9, which I'm looking at during the weekday, where God said, I will make. I'm going to stop right there. I will make. Stop right there. And here's why. When I looked at the word make, now we like the blessings, right? And so we like to hear what he's going to make. You know, he's going to make me fruitful. He's going to multiply me. He's going to confirm his covenant with me. That's the stuff. But I wanted to look at the fact that he said he was going to make. What does that mean? I'm like, that's standing out to me. How about the word make means to establish? So, when I further looked into what it meant to establish, I found three things that was revealed. Number one, the first thing that God establishes is his word. He establishes his word. And we see that in Genesis chapter 6, where he established a covenant with Noah to protect him and his small family and all the animals that was brought to Noah through this flood where God was going to destroy everything. That was the first time that he established his word. After God establishes his word, the very next thing he establishes is his people, a people to himself. So he established his word. You know, he made the decision. I'm about to say this one here. I'm about to save him and his family. And then he establishes his people. So he told Noah, he chose Noah for himself. Noah didn't choose him. He chose Noah. I said that because of what King Jesus said in John chapter 15, verse 16. He says, you didn't choose me. I chose you and appointed you to bear good fruit. So God first established his word. He established what he's getting ready to do. Then he establishes a people to himself. He established Noah and said he was going to keep Noah. And then he teaches his people how to establish, which is what he did with Noah when he gave Noah a blueprint. Well, I'm seeing this now in everything. He establishes his word. That is why we can anchor ourselves to the word of God. We can hold to the word of God because God is faithful. God's word will not fail. Whatever he says, it will come to pass. He establishes his word. And he has proven himself to be a covenant keeper because his word will not fail. It will not return to him void. He establishes, now this is the second thing, he establishes to himself a people. I talked about I talked about Noah and his three sons, right? Out of everything God chose, out of everybody of Adam's children, God said this one here, Noah. No, and then out of Noah's three sons, after they came through the ark, out of his three sons, he chose Shem. He's looking at this lineage now. Out of all the sons that Shem had, Abram, a 75-year-old man that had no children, God chose him. And you see that in Exodus chapter 12, verse 2. And what did God say to Abram in Exodus chapter 12, verse 2? He says, I will make you. Pause it right there. That part. I will make you, meaning that he was establishing Abraham now to himself. And that is covenant. But I want you to see something else. I want you to understand that that is also a marriage. It is a marriage. When we get married today, we like to write about ourselves, Mr. and Mrs., with our last name. And we like to get, I'm going to order one myself for my husband and I. There's a metal decorative piece that I look at it now. I look at it off and on, but I haven't really stepped out to actually get it, but I want to get one. And basically it will say Mr. and Mrs., then it'll have Barber, and then it'll have established 2011. And so that established 2011, right? That will be when our marriage was established. But how about this? When you enter into, or when you decide that you want to get baptized, that you want to be a Christian, that you want to receive Jesus Christ as your Lord and Savior, so you want to get baptized. And at that point that you get baptized, at that point that you start calling yourself Christian, you are established. God has established you. God opened the invitation to you, and you said, yeah, just like the people of the Israelites, just like they did when God gave them his laws. And they was like, everything you said we will do. They entered into this covenant relationship. And the thing about it is, we get baptized and we don't understand the significance about it. So what happens? We done got baptized, we serving the Lord, and then we go out and we do some stuff we ain't supposed to do. But we not thinking about, number one, we either not thinking about it, that as far as how God feels about our behaviors or whatever. Number two, we figure, we behind the closed doors, ain't nobody at church gonna see me, I'm behind these closed doors. Not paying attention to the fact that God sees you. You are not hidden from God. You are not, nor I am hidden from God, because he sees us, he hears us, he knows us, and he is watching us. That is, do the next. So he sees us. That's Jehovah El Roy. He hears us. That's Jehovah El Shammah. He knows us. That's Jehovah El Deot. And he is watching us. That's Jehovah El Shoked. And if we're not paying attention to that and keeping that in the forefront of our minds, we can go to church. We could dress up and go to church and do all the churchy things, and then turn around and leave and do all this other stuff. That's why you had people like in the clubs or whatever, and then they come to church that next day, and they're not thinking anything of it, and they don't even realize that they're adulterers, adulteresses. We're going to talk about that a little more another time. So God says to Abraham in Genesis chapter 12 verse 2, he says, I will make you. And then what he said he was going to make him was a great nation. At the time that God said that to Abraham, 75-year-old man, he had no children. Fast forward, Abraham now has several children. He has a total of 8 sons. But that second son, was the one that was chosen by God, and the one that was said to be called the seed of God, and that was Isaac. So Isaac now has 2 sons. He has twin boys, Esau and Jacob. Esau comes out first, so he's the oldest, but he didn't have an appreciation for the spiritual things. So what does he do? He sells his birthright to Joseph, who did have an appreciation for spiritual things. And please understand that these boys was about 13 years old, somewhere between 13 and 15 when grandfather Abraham died. So grandfather Abraham was pouring a lot into these young men. So anyway, Jacob is chosen. Now Jacob goes on to have 12 sons, but before we address them, and at the time all these 12 sons was together, they were not called Jacobites, they were called Israelites, and that is because God changed Jacob's name to Israel. Once again, I am jumping ahead of myself, so let me stick to my notes. So Jacob has these 12 sons, right? And when he had the sons, but this was what God said to Jacob at a time where he had found out that his son, the next to the youngest, Joseph, was still alive and he was in Egypt. So I guess Jacob was feeling some kind of way. He wanted to go see him, but like he was feeling some type of way about leaving that territory. And so Genesis chapter 46 verse 3, God says to Jacob, do not be afraid to go to Egypt. He says to him that he would go with him. He was like, wherever you go, I'm with you. And what that was a reminder to Jacob of what he said to Jacob in Genesis chapter 28 verse 15, where God told him that wherever he went, he would be with him, that he would keep him wherever he go, that he would not leave him until he has done to him everything that he has spoken. Why? Because remember, the very first thing God does is he establishes his word. So God tells Jacob, whose name is changed by God to Israel, and that happens in Genesis chapter 32 verse 28. He tells him not to be afraid to go down into Egypt, and he says to Jacob, he says, for I will make, remember that this is what he said to grandfather Abraham, for I will make you a great nation there. He had told his grandfather that. And so now Jacob is being told that. So now you fast forward again, and we find ourselves in Exodus chapter 1 verse 5 through 7. And again, whenever you read God saying I will make, he is establishing a covenant there. So in Exodus chapter 1 verse 5 through 7, we're told that 70 people went down to Egypt with Jacob, and it was only 70 because Joseph was already down there with his family. And we're told, I think it's like verse 5 or verse 7 1, we're told that they continue to grow. So we're going to fast forward again. Time passes, and we're going to do this fast forward because again, God's timing is not our timing. Number one, I think we all know that. So we have to wait, and so there are things that are happening in the process of waiting. But when it comes time, God is getting ready to bring Israel out of Egypt, and that takes us to Exodus chapter 12. So he miraculously brings the Israelites out, but along with the Israelites coming out of Egypt is a vast mixed company who came out also, who took advantage of what was going on to come on out also. Okay. And then he brings them, all of them, the vast mixed company that came out and the Israelites, he brings them to his holy mountain. And so I want to look at that now. This is Exodus chapter 19, because remember, he establishes his word, and he establishes his people next, and then he teaches them to establish. So right now we're getting ready to look in Exodus 19 of him establishing his people. He established his word when he told Abraham, long before Abraham had any children, what was going to happen to his descendants, that there would be 400 years of slave. And he told them why. He said, because the iniquity of the Amorites was not yet full. So anyway, Exodus chapter 19, this is verse number 1 through 6. Let's read it now. Turn this page. Okay, here we go. It says, in the third month, that will be the month of Sivan, which month it is now, actually. In the third month, after the children of Israel had gone out of the land of Egypt on the same day, they came to the wilderness of Sinai. For they had departed from Rephidim and had come to the wilderness of Sinai and camped in the wilderness. So Israel camped there before the mountain. And Moses went up to God, and the Lord called to him from the mountain, saying, thus you shall say to the house of Jacob, and tell the children of Israel, you have seen what I did to the Egyptians, and how I bore you on eagle's wings and brought you to myself. Now therefore, If you will indeed obey my voice and keep my covenant, then you shall be a special treasure to me above all people, for all the earth is mine, and you shall be to me a kingdom of priests and a holy nation. These are the words which you shall speak to the children of Israel. So now God is establishing to himself a people in that verse. So now going down to verse number 10. The next thing he does after he establishes his people to himself, he now tells them to separate, because they need to consecrate themselves. So they are supposed to separate from the vast mixed company that had already come out with them. And they were to get ready because God was going to meet directly with them. And so we see that in verse 10 where it says, Then the Lord said to Moses, Go to the people and consecrate them today and tomorrow, and let them wash their clothes, and let them be ready for the third day. For on the third day the Lord will come down upon Mount Sinai in the sight of the people. So that was them being consecrated. Again, he is establishing to himself a people. The next thing we see is in Exodus chapter 20, where he now gives the people his law, which he has already established. So he gives them his law, the 10 commandments, to the people, and in giving the law to them, number one, he identifies himself to them. So what you're seeing now in the giving of the law, you're seeing a suzerain vassal relationship with God, being the suzerain, them being the vassals. We'll talk more about that later. But God identifies himself to the people. He says, I am the Lord your God who brought you out of the land of Egypt, out of the house of bondage. And then he gives the laws. Now there's 10 laws, but I'm only going to mention the first 2. Number 1, he said, you should have no other gods before me. Number 2, he said, you should not make for yourselves a carved image, any likeness of anything in the heavens above, that is in the earth beneath, or that is in the water under the earth. You should not bow down to them to serve them, for I, the Lord your God, am a jealous God. Now, skipping past all of the rest of the laws that he gave, we now come to Exodus chapter 21. After he gives his statutes, which is the written laws, Exodus chapter 20, in chapter 21, he now lays down some judgments that was to ground the people so that they did not hurt themselves trying to navigate their newfound freedom. Now, listen, there's no different. This is no different from what was done. Not there's no difference, but this is no different from what was done with the slaves back when they came out of slavery. We're talking our time now, with the slaves when they came out of slavery. What's his name? Thomas Allen, I think, the one who founded the African American Methodist Church, the AMEC, African Methodist Episcopal Church. They set in place boundaries for a lot of different things, to help the slaves to transition so that they would not hurt themselves because of having this freedom and not knowing how to handle this freedom, not knowing what to do. How about this? It's no different from a person coming out of prison, having been locked up for a long time, going into a re-entry program that helps them to transition from being locked up, slavery, to having this newfound freedom. How about this? It's no different from taking a baby and taking this baby out of this crib and putting them in a playpen that gives them extra space, but still with some boundaries so that they would not hurt themselves. These judgments might have felt restrictive, but it was not meant to harm them or hurt them. It was actually meant to help them. In chapter 25 of Exodus now, because again, chapter 21 to chapter 21 to chapter 24. No, chapter 21 to chapter 23, you're dealing with the judgments. Chapter 24, Israel affirms the covenant. They say yes. God is giving them the option, do you want to enter into this covenant with me? Like a person today, asking a person, will you marry me? And the other one would be like, yes, they confirmed the covenant. Exodus 25. Now we see the blueprint. God has he has established his word. He has kept his word with the people. He brought them out of Egypt. He brought them out from under the yoke. He freed them from being slaves. He has kept his word. And now he redeemed them with an outstretched arm. And how about this? This is the old covenant. The old covenant is, number one, God says, I will bring you out from under the yoke. He did that. He kept his word. He says, I will free you from being a slave. He did that. He kept his word. He says, I will redeem you with an outstretched arm. He did that. He kept his word. He says, I will take you as my own and be your God. Now that he has established his word, he is not establishing his people. I will take you as my own people and be your God. So Exodus 25 now, we see the blueprint, which is part 3. God is now teaching his people whom he established to himself. He's now teaching them how to establish. And so in verse 9, he says to Moses, according to all that I show you. I'm giving you the blueprints now, because I'm teaching you how to do this. According to all that I show you, that is the pattern of the tabernacle and the pattern of all its furnishings, just so you shall make it. Now we get from chapter 25 to chapter 30, which is what my study was today. And again, we're still looking at the blueprint, but God did something that we missed. He did something that I missed. He did something that we missed. What God did was he prepared for our failure. I'm going to say that again. God already knew our flaws. Going back to Genesis chapter 8, God said before he dealt with Noah and made his covenant with Noah, this is what God said. This is verse number 21, Genesis 8:21. It says, and the Lord smelled a soothing aroma. Then the Lord said in his heart, remember, he confirms his word first. He said in his heart, I will never again curse the ground for man's sake, although the imagination of man's heart is evil from his youth. Nor will I again destroy every living thing as I have done. Now, I paused there for this reason. Everybody was destroyed off the earth, except for Noah, his wife, his 3 sons, and their 3 wives. And God already knew what they were going to do. He knew what Canaan was going to do. He already knew. So while God is giving Moses, fast forward again, getting back over to Exodus 30, while God is giving Moses, or Exodus 25, while he's giving Moses the blueprints, in which was included the ability to once a year atone for themselves, giving a half shekel to the Lord. So this will be chapter 30, verse 12. While God is giving Moses these blueprints, which includes this ability for them to atone for themselves, that half shekel that they had to give to the Lord did not have as a purpose paying to erase our sins. In the Catholic religion, there is something called an indulgence. And what that indulgence is in this religion, the indulgence was a remission of temporal punishment or consequences that was still due for sins that was already forgiven. the indulgence was to reduce or eliminate the temporal punishment that was required to repair the spiritual damage caused by the sin. But this was not the purpose of the ransom money. This was not the purpose of what God had commanded as a payment, the half shekel of silver. The ransom money that we're looking at in Exodus chapter 30, verses 11 through 16, was an equalizer. That's my word, equalizer. The rich, we talked about this already. The rich could not pay more, because I got all this money so I could get a little bit more, because I got all this money. The rich couldn't pay more. It was still a half a shekel. The poor couldn't pay less. It was still a half a shekel. And what that did was it represented this ransom money. It represented that God was not a respecter of persons. It represented that the rich could not buy, and you know how they feel like, I got all this money, I can just go buy, and money is no object to me, I can go. No. God sees all of us the same. All of us. There's no big eyes. There's no little U's. All this status stuff that is happening down here today. The ransom money that was required put an end to all of that. It shut all of that down. People thinking that they're better than or whatever. The ransom money shut all of that down. God nullified that with a small amount. A half of a shekel. Now, I want to share this. During the Middle Ages, I'm going to read it from my notes. During the Middle Ages, there were some corrupt church officials who abused this practice of the ransom money, who abused the practice of, they abused it. And what they did was they allowed people to make financial donations. And how about that trickled down to today in all these different denominations, where people don't even know today that there is a difference between the tithe and the offering. Because they read, like when they're getting ready to do his offering time, and then they read from Malachi chapter 3, will you rob God? All of you are robbing God, right? And then he says to bring in all the tithes. But do they say all the tithes and the offerings? Because that's not what God said in that verse. He said bring in all the tithes. He didn't say all the tithes and the offerings, number one. The tithes and the offerings are two different things, and they had individual specific purposes, both the tithes and the offerings. And many don't understand what the true purpose was or how it impacts us today. And how about this? Our not knowing causes us to run the risk of becoming guilty of robbing God, who said that his people died from a lack of knowledge. So anyway, Exodus chapter 30, the people are given a blueprint. But before the work of the building could begin, which it doesn't begin until Exodus chapter 37, before it could begin, the people, the Israelites, break covenant with God in Exodus chapter 32. And that was serious. Imagine this. Imagine you get married. And imagine no sooner than after you get married, then does your marriage mate commit adultery and sleep with somebody else. Now, let's talk about this. How are you going to feel about that? You're going to be angry. You're going to want a divorce. But if you decide to work through it, still angry and all, the dynamics of that marriage will have changed. Why? Because the trust was broken. And that's what happened that took us from Exodus chapter 30 verse 15, where the people can bring in this ransom price and atone for themselves, to the position where we are right now, where we have to go through King Jesus, who atoned for us. What happened to cause that difference was what happened in Exodus chapter 32, when the Israelites broke covenant. So understand this, because they broke covenant before the blueprints even began being built. They did it before, like they did it early on, which means the blueprints did its job, because the blueprints is supposed to expose areas that are weak before you start working on the project, so that you can do whatever changes need to be made so that what you're building will be strong and stable. So the blueprint exposed the weakness. It exposed that the people were the weakness. And so the Israelites, even though this ransom was a part of the blueprint, they never got the chance to experience the ransoming of themselves, because they broke covenant. And not just them. Listen, I'm talking about what they did here, but that blueprint actually exposes all of us. So none of us has ever got the chance to experience what it's like to ransom ourselves, to make atonement for ourselves, because all of us are flawed. So anyway, God loved us so much. And I'm mentioning that because in Exodus chapter 32, when the people broke covenant, God was angry. He was angry. He wanted to kill them all and start over with Moses. But Moses interceding, the way Moses interceded, God ended up relenting. And this is what Moses did. This is how he did it. It's in Exodus chapter 32. It's verses number 12 and 13. I actually want to read it. Exodus chapter 32, verse 12 and 13. This is what it says. Why? And this is Moses speaking to the Lord. He says, why should the Egyptians... You know what? I'm going to start at verse 11. It says that Moses pleaded with the Lord. He pleaded. Listen, when somebody's angry, really, really angry, and you trying to get through to them and they're angry, he pleaded with the Lord. It says, then Moses pleaded with the Lord his God and said, Lord, why does your wrath burn hot against your people whom you have brought out of the land of Egypt with a great power and with a mighty hand? Why should the Egyptians speak and say, he brought them out to harm them, to kill them in the mountain, and to consume them from the face of the earth? Turn from your fierce wrath and relent from this harm to your people. And here was the key. He said, remember Abraham, Isaac, and Israel, your servants, to whom you swore by your own self. Remember, God first establishes his word. He says, and said to them, I will multiply your descendants as the stars of the heaven. It says, and all this land that I have spoken of, I give to your descendants, that they should inherit it forever. Verse 14, it says, so the Lord relented from the harm that he said that he would do to his people. The key was when Moses reminded God of his own words spoken to Abraham, Isaac, and Jacob. That's what caused God to relent. God didn't relent because of us. He did not relent because of the Israelites. He relented because he is faithful even when we are unfaithful. He relented because he first establishes his word. And so he stands on his word, and then he establishes his people. So the blueprint, it exposed the flaw before the building began. The building did not begin until Exodus 37. The blueprint exposed the flaw, and it required that a shift happen. Now, in that shift, a new covenant blueprint is drawn up. I'm going to say that again. In that shift, a new covenant blueprint is drawn up. That new covenant or that blueprint is called a revision or an update. The old one is not thrown away. Instead, a new version is created. Did you hear me? A new version is created. And officially document the modifications. You create a new version, and then you officially document the modifications. So the updated blueprint is called a revised blueprint, and it will be listed as like revision A, revision B, revision C, etc. And in the revision of the documents is what the change was, who made it, and when it was made. Now, check this out. Architects today and engineers will keep the old version for legal reasons, for historical reasons, and for liability reasons to track exactly how the design actually evolved. So, Exodus chapter 19 through 20, God establishes to himself a people. Exodus chapter 25 through 30, the blueprints are given. Exodus chapter 32, the established covenant was broken. Exodus chapter 32 through 33, God relented from his anger, but give him a minute now, because you know that we be in our feelings too. So give him a minute, because in Exodus chapter 34, God then renews his covenant. Many people today seem to think erroneously that the new covenant that Jesus signed with his blood, that didn't come about till Matthew, Mark, Luke, and John, and that's not correct. It is in Exodus chapter 34 that God renewed his covenant with his people, but this time the covenant is different. The question is, how exactly is it different? So let me show you. The old covenant was dependent upon man. It was dependent upon man's obedience to it. But man could not fulfill the requirements of obedience to the old covenant because of our sinful nature. We could not fulfill that. So when God made the new covenant and when he shifted, it was no longer because he loved us so much and he really wanted to make this covenant with us, but we were failing just over and over and over. He shifted, and what he did was he now comes down and lives on earth as a man. And he now, coming down to the earth, fulfills the requirement of obedience to the old covenant, because man could not do it, because man was faulty. So he had to come down as a man and do it himself. And then when he did that, coming down in the form of man, living among us, fulfilling the obedience to the law, dying for us, and leaving a model for us to follow closely, so that under the new covenant, all we got to do is be obedient to King Jesus. All we got to do is believe him and do whatever he tells us to do. That's it. Why? Because He already came down and fulfilled the old covenant. So we just follow, and he made it easy for us. We don't have to figure nothing out. We just got to step where he stepped. How about this? We're taught this as a child, but we don't understand what we're being taught. In preschool, in elementary school, there are games, movement games, where we copy physical acts. There is elimination and rule games where we must obey commands. There is games that help a child with their listening skills. So we have games like Follow the Leader, Simon Says, Mother May I, Red Light, Green Light, Duck, Duck, Goose, Copycat, and more. That's why, again, all we have to do is follow what King Jesus says to do, because he set the example for us. But that's also why King Jesus says to us in Luke chapter 6, verse 46, he says, why do you call me Lord, Lord, and you don't do what I tell you to do? So the issue really is that we haven't been obeying King Jesus, because everything that we're taught, how about we're taught religion? We're taught rules. Just do as I say, do what I tell you. But it's not broken down to us so that we can understand. And what did King Jesus say? He said, in all you're getting, don't just get wisdom, get understanding. And then on top of that, we're discouraged from reading the Old Testament books because we're told that the Old Testament books are obsolete, when the truth be told is no, they're not. Not obsolete at all. So the blueprint comes first, then the making, and then the positioning. Get this in your thoughts. The blueprint comes first, then the making, and then the positioning. The blueprint then is Genesis through Deuteronomy. That's the blueprint. The making is from Joshua to Malachi. It's all the things that the Israelites was doing wrong because they weren't following the blueprints. And then the positioning is Matthew to Revelation, where we're being restored now. And I'm going to end this here. There's so much more that I want to share, but I'm going to end this right here and let you just soak that in, and just me myself too, just soak it in. Like, this is so amazing, so amazing, so amazing. So thank you for watching. I really appreciate it. Let me share this one last thing with you. We have officially opened up our interactive study. What do I call it? Interactive study companion, which is where this study, and there'll be a link in the comments area, but this study that you just watched, there are questions, scriptures, fill in the blank, follow the thread. There's a lot of interaction with the actual study that you would do, where is really digging to make sure that, or it really helps you to make sure that you're understanding it. You're given questions that you can answer. Like, it is really, really, really amazing. And so I invite you to check it out. We'll be uploading all of the video studies. We're still building more platforms for some of the other studies that have already been done. Like, for instance, right now we have the Leviticus 26 study uploaded, but it's only the section that does the blessings, which is what I call something old, something new, but it's the blessings, verses 1 through 13. That platform is ready to go, and it has a study or two, a couple of studies uploaded to it. Of course, this is the Sabbath study, Understanding Covenant Language and Understanding Covenants. That is uploaded and ready to go, which is this one here. What else? We will have one being uploaded for the Malachi 3 studies. It's not done yet, but it will soon be uploaded. The study, Will You Judge Them, Son of Man, that will be soon uploaded. the 5 ways of discipline, like all of these various studies that we have done on this YouTube channel. There's over 1,000 studies. We are now preparing to bring them over to the website with a interactive study, an interactive study companion. And listen, you can use this with, like, if you're teaching others, you can use this, if you want to do like a course or whatever and help others learn, or y'all get together and like, it's just so much that could be done with it. But we're making this thing available right now, so I just wanted to open that up to you and let you know it's over there. So with that being said, check out the links. It's in the description area, it's in the comments area. And thank you for watching. We're definitely not through with Exodus chapter 30. We'll come back to this again next week and pick up with, because we got 3 more blueprints to look at. Blueprints for the bronze laver, for the holy anointing oil, and for the incense. So this is an amazing study. I hope y'all enjoyed it. Come back for more, because there's going to be more. Bye for now. Thank you for taking this journey with me, this study with me. I appreciate it. Bye.